I'll start in a minute after I listen to this song. I don't know how Instagram works, if you can hear the song or not. Probably not. I'd probably get in trouble for using it too. So copyright infringement. But it's Tuesday Morning by the Pogues, and it is Tuesday morning, so it's an appropriate song. Tuesday Morning by the Pogues. That's the song. Can you hear me? Okay, the song's over. Mic check, mic check. If someone who's listening can hear me, just say yes in the chat. Great. So I'll probably be out here for 20-30 minutes. It's not going to be a super long one today. I'm just going to do a little podcasty version update thing. It's been about a month since the last ones on Instagram. But if you are on my Substack or Facebook and Patreon and stuff, you know that more stuff has been going on. So I just want to update quickly. The next event is tomorrow. It's for death practice group people. So if you've already done a death practice group, you can come by donation to the one that's tomorrow. And if you haven't come to a death practice group yet, the next death practice, number 8, is on, I think, the 25th. Yeah, Wednesday the 25th. And you can also buy recorded recordings of the first 7. And that's located on the animistarts.art website, where you can scroll down to the bottom of the death practice group subpage and get the instructions for how to purchase recordings. The first 7 recordings are sort of like a first cycle of teachings, which is to say that if I die tomorrow, which is always a possibility, you can really get the basics with those first 7. About 4 hours long. All the supplementary material might take you a few years to get through it all or understand it all, but it's all there as a baseline. It's basically like the ABCs, the kindergarten through maybe 2nd grade kind of fire hose of what it would mean to actually practice this without escaping your life, but actually transforming your collected karma. I'm going to talk about that more in this talk, because people still have a very problematic view of trauma and pain and karma, and it feeds into the dichotomies of the binary problems that we have in society. But I just want to list some more events first. So in between the death practice that's tomorrow and the formal new death practice that is on the 25th, we are going to be presenting, Larissa and I, at the Rewilding Conference online, doing an hour presentation on Saturday and an hour-long workshop-y thing on Sunday. If you're into it, you know, you're going to get a lot. There's obviously a lot of other teachers. And it might not be for everybody, and I don't know even how much it costs, so don't ask me. But we are going to be there. And then after the death practice group on the 25th, Bree Greenberg, LMFT, and I are going to be doing our 3rd podcast. We've done 2 very long movie-length podcast conversations, And we decided for the third one that we were going to do a combination of a workshop and a podcast recording. And it's called Vital Belonging. All of the, if you go to bit.ly, I made it a bit.ly link. So if you go to bit.ly/vital belonging with no spaces, all lowercase, you can see the registration details and the explanation of what that is. And that's just going to be a really 3 to 4 hour long. People who pay to show up live will be able to have live processes with us during that time. And obviously it's not like an hour-long therapy session for your individual issues. It's more like quick and dirty, maybe 15-minute, lightning round sessions where you get that reflection from Bree and me, if you choose to. It's a choice, obviously. No one gets forced into any of this. But that entire thing is going to be put up as a podcast for free. So the payment is to sort of participate live, if you want to do that kind of thing. If you're interested in the sort of fun, risky aspect of doing real demos live on a podcast, and you actually want to, maybe you can't afford a real, like a formal session, because let's face it, the timing is, that's just how it works. And I don't really do private sessions anymore anyway, because they don't seem to function the way that I need them to for the thing that I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes. And that's for January. And February is still cooking in the oven, so I don't know. I can't really say anything about that yet. But I've been compiling writings into some kind of project. Some of them go on Substack and some of them disappear into archives that I'm going to use something with. But I was very sick. For the last 3 to 4 weeks, which is usually the case, but hasn't been so strongly the case in the last few years. But earlier in my life, it was usually the case anyway, is that I would have a birthday and then I would start to get sick because of the winter season and my immune system. And this time it happened again in different ways, because now I have all of these co-infections and, different microbes in the system, which is fine, but it's an opportunity for practice. But anyway, during this sickness-death period, which is appropriate, because if you do any death practice group, you'll understand that the winter solstice is the deathing of the system, and that it's actually the best time to die. And so during this period, and then through New Year's, and then I was healthy sort of New Year's, and then I went out. We went out New Year's Eve, and then I caught a respiratory infection. That was not COVID, and it was not a lung thing. It was just in my sinuses, and I was sick with that for the last week, pretty intensely. And as I'm sick, sometimes I'm still able to write, and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes the brain fog just takes over, and I just am like having an Alzheimer's moment. And sometimes there's a breakthrough where the writing just comes because it's not really mine anyway. And so I got a few talks with some beings this last month, and I want to share some of that with you, but most of it has been filtered through the writing. But the first thing I want to say is that, largely in America and the Western world, we have this worldview of individualism, which actually is the underlying root of your trauma. You might think that your trauma is because you were abused by some outside force, which that isn't really the issue. That might be the inciting event. That's like the wound that opens to the infection that is present on the surface of the skin. Okay, so we all have this. We all have a personal history story that we tell ourselves, and that personal history story places us as a kind of victim hero, a victimized hero that has been harmed and betrayed, and that betrayal shows up in the form of PTSD or trauma or various colonizing forces that we don't have control over. And it's somehow the journey of that battle is the sort of thing that we keep telling ourselves and other people, and it's propped up in the trauma industrial complex because it's useful to not have people break free from their individualism. Because the trauma industrial complex is just another leg of capitalism that wants you to believe fully in a fiction called individualism so that you'll be a good, pliable, stupid little peasant, the same way that most of your white ancestors in the last 400 years were peasants and slaves. Yeah, but they just were called something different, indentured servants or something. And I'm just talking to the white people right now, but everyone has this in their history. And then, of course, those white people decided to infect and dominate lots of other people for the last 500 years, since Columbus was the kind of viral bomb that they sent over and then spread that viral bomb from the islands to the mainlands. And now we have this very tiny story. Each of us has a fractured story about who was the bad guy and who's the victim and who's the savior. And the savior is usually some Jesus Christ pastiche, some mythic pastiche that doesn't exist, but is a kind of fantasy that props up your individual victim hero story. Because somehow Jesus paid for your sins already, as if you could somehow take the responsibility off of your dumb ass. Like somehow that's a gift to sort of make it so that you don't have to be responsible, which doesn't make any sense at all. There's no world in which our interdependence can be outsourced to somebody else without the traumatic fracturing that you see happening, which are the symptoms in both the bypasser and the one who memorializes their trauma. So that was the money sentence right there, probably, in this stream. Is that there are bypassers who believe that they can shortcut accountability because they believe that they're special individuals that can do that. And that is told, and they project that story onto figures like Jesus and Buddha in order to continually have their cake and eat it too, which is to say all the good parts of individualism but none of the bad. So those are all the bypassers, and we each have a bypasser inside of us, which is a narcissist, who believes that we can loophole and excuse ourselves from interdependent, collective, karmic transformation. And then there's the part of us and others that really believes that we are a victim and that we are the one who has been wronged and we have been betrayed and we are owed something from the universe, some kind of repair or reparations. And that victimhood is memorialized as our identity, right? I mean, everyone, you know what I'm talking about. And then we have justifications on top of justifications in order to justify. Defending the hamster wheel, I call it. I call it defending the defending, or defending the hamster wheel. It's this kind of, you never really get anywhere, you just kind of talk around and around and around about how sad and fucked up you always will be forever until some magical event happens outside of you that saves you, such as whatever, revolution or God, the rapture, or miracle or something happens, right? So this issue that we're having about trauma and PTSD, it is a fractured piece of a puzzle. It's like half of a book. If every other word on a book was erased and put in another book, and you had two books, and you would need both of those books to read the story. This is the metaphor. One book is called I'm a Victim, and the other is called I'm a Hero. And the hero book is the bypasser who says, I can just get enlightened, and I'm not white anymore, and I'm colorblind, and it's not my fault. My ancestors did it. It's not my fault. But I'm a good person, and I practice Dharma, and I practice spirituality and witchcraft or whatever, and we're done. It's good. And then there's the other side to that, which is that when you memorialize your trauma, you can't ever get any space from it, ever. And so both of these stories are actually the same story, outsourced in asymmetrical ways to different bodies. So one person has one book, part of that half a book, and one person has the other half of the book, and they're running around thinking they have the entire book. I have the whole book. But you don't have the whole book. You have a piece of the book. You have a piece of the story. You don't have the whole story, but you think you have the whole book. Because individualism tells us that we're individuals with individual problems. Individual karma. And on some level, there is a kind of individualized karma, but it's not the same thing that I'm saying here. And so I just want to explain it. There is a birth fate that each of us has that's a unique signature, which is to say each of us comes into the world carrying a very particular ratio of collective karma. And when I say karma, I don't mean sin, and I don't mean blessings. I mean a bundle of things, a bundle of consequences that is both annoying and beautiful, depending on how you look at it, and depending on which part is active at any given time in your life. But there is no absolutism here. It's all relative. The uniqueness is that each of us has a kind of unique watercolor painting of the collective's karma, filtered through our birth, our culture, our parents, our genealogy, all the way back to the beginning of time. Okay. So, this is the problem with race and gender. You don't get to choose which part of the watercolor you are carrying on behalf of the collective. You think that because of these fictions that the world tells you that you have male or female or white or black or some kind of particular epigenetic trauma that you need to deal with, right? You think that. Okay? And it's not true, but you think it's true, and then you go about your life acting from this ignorant certainty that you have this individual epigenetic karma trauma thing, and it's yours. But it's not yours, it's ours. You're just carrying it for us, and I'm just carrying mine for y'all. And that's all it's ever been, and that's all it ever will be. So every single thing that you think is a blessing or a burden is a collective piece of this story that you've been given to transform and carry across the finish line, which is called death. And until you truly understand that, you won't get very far dealing with your symptoms. You might be able to regulate a little bit more. Like, oh, I'm dysregulated and I'm going to do this breathing technique and massage my polyvagal nerve and I feel better and grounded. That's fine. But that's superficial at best. And it's like putting on your shoes before you go hiking. It's good hygiene to do that. But stop trying to feed me the bullshit that you've healed your trauma because you massaged your neck a little bit. Okay? Because you did some Wim Hof breath work? No. That's not it. That's not how it works. If we understand that the root of all of our problems, for the most part, the root of suffering, is a kind of addiction to dissociation, because we don't want to feel this collective holding that we've been given, right? We don't want to feel certain things, so we're addicted to dissociation, and we dissociate via these narratives of victim or hero, exceptional person, or whatever. Then all we're ever going to be doing is creating new symptoms. New symptoms. And sometimes those new symptoms show up in other people's bodies. So this is what racism kind of is. Racism is an outsourcing of collective issues onto certain bodies only. It's also a lot of other things. Misogyny, ableism, right? It's like, I don't want to feel how I'm disabled because I'm a healthy person. So the minute you say that kind of individual toxicity, you've energetically outsourced more onto the people who are susceptible to carrying more of that. Well, you're already carrying some part of disability, so here's more. Here's more bullshit for you to carry. And then those people get sicker, or they get, worse. They get more like a homeless person, right? They become more destitute. And then we go, well, that's your fucking individual problem. You're stupid. But the reality is that it doesn't work that way. Nobody really chooses. It's not consensual. This karma game is not consensual. You don't get to bargain. You don't get to bargain. Well, you just think you get to bargain because you've been told you're an individual, special person. While you're still actually kind of being, controlled by these oligarchical forces of like capitalism and, classism and all this other shit. Because you think that you could just, if you work hard enough, you can just exempt yourself from all of it. You can become healthy, you can have the best sex ever, you can become enlightened, you can become wealthy. These are all exemption clauses that you think you can write into your contract, right? They're everywhere. Just scroll Instagram, you'll see all the exemption contracts. People are playing them out as if they're an identity role that they can play. Well, if I just play able and beautiful and sexy and skillful long enough, I will become more status. I will have more status and I can become exempt from my collective karma. And it's an oxymoron because there's no escape from any of it. You can't escape interdependence, even when you're dead. All you can really do is go, hey, I'm carrying this. It's hard. You can admit that it's difficult to carry what you've been carrying. It's fine. I admit that every day. I go, this is rough shit. This is gnarly. But then I go, thank you for this opportunity, on behalf of all beings, to transform this collective consequence called karma. And I don't know what that means, but I say, I'm going to carry it differently today. I'm going to try to really make it so that I'm not constantly whining about it inside, like I've been betrayed by my mom and dad perpetually, like a bitch, like a baby bitch. I'm all just crying all the time because life is fucking hard. And we've all been there. But at a certain point, you got to wake up and go, maybe I should just get to work and, be creative about this thing that happens to everyone, which is called getting older and getting sicker and getting more disabled and dying. And I can use that to kind of transform this burden that I was given at birth, called our collective karma and our interdependent karma, right? And nobody's going to get a fucking merit badge to do this, because there's nobody who has been exempt from this game. So if you think, well, if I do this, I'll get a merit badge or I'll get a reward. Well, no, the reward is just doing the thing that everyone has to do. And then you become a little more clear in your Shen. Your soul gets a little more clear, and you go, yeah, it's really hard. Sometimes I want to give up. Sometimes I want to hurt myself or commit suicide. But I don't. I turn that pain into like an artwork. Maybe I write a journal or a story about it. I don't have to really do it. And then somebody reads that and goes, man, I was feeling so terrible. I was just depressed. And depressed is code word for, I don't know how to deal with my collective karma. And I'm calling it karma now instead of trauma, because trauma is like, oh, your individual trauma. Oh, you poor baby. No. So a person maybe reads your story, or like you help someone out at the food bank, or you just smile kindly to someone on the street when they feel like nobody loves them ever. You don't even have to know them. You just give them decent respect. And you see they're carrying collective karma on behalf of all of us. And usually it's asymmetrical. You see it. You see the homeless person. You see the black woman. You see the disabled person. And you don't pity them. But you really see, oh man, you're carrying so much on behalf of all of us. And you don't try to take it away from them, because you really can't. That's a systemic collective issue. But on a personal level, you can give them kindness, and you can sort of carry yours more. You carry it more. You go, you know what, I'm going to carry mine more. I'm going to not dissociate from it. And actually the undissociation from your carrying might alleviate, in a distributed way, one tiny grain of the heaviness that is on somebody else's soul that they were forced to carry because other people were dissociating from what they should be carrying, because it's a distributed network. So all of that could happen in one single breath. And you just see them on the street, and you nod, but you don't pity them. You don't think they're an individual fuck up, or you go, the drug addiction is actually because they're trying to manage their karma, right? And then you see how you're still kind of an addict too, but you've just been a little luckier and you've had the privilege. Maybe somebody helped you and you not super addict anymore. Or maybe you just got to bypass all of that because of the way the society works, where certain people get to sort of cut to the front of the line, which is not really fair. But you can, just like the Buddha did, Wake up to the fact that you didn't earn any of your riches, and they're not yours. You didn't earn a goddamn thing, and you don't own a house, because you can't, and even if you did, it's on haunted land anyway. So what the fuck are you talking about? You think you can be exempt? It's all haunted. It's all haunted. Every single apartment, every single house, every single building is haunted. You don't get to escape just because you think you're a special person who's like got different color skin, so you don't get to... It's all haunted. It's a whole haunted mess. It's all haunted. It's interdependent, right? So you look at this person, and in that moment you see the totality for a brief instant of everybody's collective burden, which is that we're all carrying things across the finish line for each other as a collective, which includes people in the past and people in the future and all sorts of things. And in that moment, you actually like maybe smile, like your soul smiles to their soul, and it does something, but we don't know. So there's no merit badge. But there is the courageousness of going, you're carrying too much on behalf of all beings, and I hope that when you die, you all go. Like, you can actually let it all go, and it'll be recycled, and the rest of us will carry the rest of it, maybe. And in this life, hopefully we can dismantle enough oppressive systems that you can just breathe through the heavy rocks that you have been carrying. Because maybe that's all that person, that single individual person, is going to be able to do in this lifetime, is just endure the pain of the fate that they were given. And it's not fair, but it's also not personal. And so each person listening to this, when it gets really hard and you feel like it's really personal, like you've been personally attacked by God or something, you have to understand, a lot of people have it a lot worse. And if you just sort of figured out how to distribute and not outsource your pain, it would kind of feel more like grace. You know, like your pain isn't yours, is sort of what I'm saying. And the reason that Western culture is so fucked up, in my opinion, is this individualism issue. Because a lot of other cultures still have, they still have these rituals, but there was a ritual sacrifice kind of maturation process in which you understood what you were carrying on behalf of the collective body. And it didn't mean that it was easy. It didn't mean that you liked it or you would have chosen it. There's no consent here. The consent is mostly in your immaturity becoming mature by saying, this is what I was given, I accept the task. I accept the task I've been given on behalf of all beings. If this is what the ancestors, the gods, whatever word you use to describe the forces of fate, if this is what I was given, okay. Now I got my marching orders and I'm going to figure it out. But most people in the West don't have this. No one says any of this. So we all run around going individual people with individual problems. And then some people go, oh, there's epigenetic trauma, but that's still individual people with individual problems narrative. Oh, my people have this problem, so now I have this problem. Yeah, your people is all people. My people is your people is my people. There's no, exemption clause. That's what I'm saying. There's no exemption clause from all beings interdependent. So, this whole trauma, this somatic trauma narrative, baby, remedial, kindergarten, baby, toddler bullshit, is invested in you staying in kindergarten forever. And maybe they'll graduate you to first grade after you've totally and finally 100% accepted their fictional narrative about the universe. Because if you start waking up to the fact that it's always been a collective endeavor, you're going to become a radical revolutionary person. You're going to realize that the only way forward is land back and land trusts and worker cooperatives and unions and coalitions and mutual aid and solidarity and disability justice and racial justice and queer justice and breaking gender norms and abolishing the police and the prison system. This is the only way, because you start to go, oh, this is a collective karma. The only way to deal with collective karma is if each of us deals with collective karma. So, how do we reconcile, then, this collective non-dual animism? Okay, so we're going to name it. I'm just going to name it. Non-dual animism is collectivism. It's non-dual animism. It's collectivism. It's original and undefined. Okay? Which is to say, this is what our ancient black grandmothers figured out 300, 200,000 years ago. Okay? And I've talked about this before, and if you've listened to Death Practice Group, and if you've studied the Radical Anthropology Group, you understand what I'm talking about. It's hunter-gatherer collectivism, where there's no hierarchies, there's just interdependent, modular wisdom. And nobody gets to dominate other people. Otherwise, groups dominate that individual back into the collective. So this is the original undefined animism. So shout out to Brant Stickley. Shout out to lots of people who understand what I'm talking about. Because this is pre-everything. This is pre-Taoism. This is pre-Buddhism. This is pre-Shaivism. This is pre-Tantra. This is actually what would eventually allow those things to become codified, sort of specialized streams of wisdom, right? So this undefined non-dual animism, which is the heart of collectivism and interdependence in an animist world, that's the non-duality that I mainly practice. And it has no name. So if you say, Dare, are you a Taoist? Are you a Buddhist? I'm like, no, because the context is wrong. The worldview narrative is wrong already. Because you've just started to separate things into these weird little boxes where Buddhism is special and exempt, and Taoism is special and exempt, and Christianity is special and exempt. So this undefined, nascent, uncodified, collectivist, non-dual animism, which didn't have a lot of concepts and didn't have a lot of words attached to it, and was mostly behavior-based. It was relational and behavioral-based, and it was vibe-based. They were vibes. It was more like a theater. It's a theater of collectivism, okay? Non-dual animist theater of collectivism, where you create rituals in order to prove your collectivism over and over again, and it feels really good, and you just keep doing it. And then eventually the climate changed enough so that we could do this terrible thing called agriculture. Not really terrible, but the way that we do it is pretty terrible. It's very weird. So the climate changed enough so that this mass scale, sustainable, long-term, year-long agricultural program could begin in certain parts of the world. And now that's the way we do things, for the most part. And that's sort of where a lot of the isms start to solidify. So that's where patriarchy, misogyny, debt, the idea of debt and property ownership and owing, and banking, commerce, these kinds of problematic issues start to come into play once we believe that we can own the land and it becomes the source of nutrition because we till the land. Okay? So then after this, the individualized streams of wisdom traditions start to appear, the various forms of witchcraft and religion and spirituality that we now call Taoism, Buddhism, all the other things, the 10 million fucking things, Sufism, Tantra, all this stuff, like all these streams of knowledge. And now people go, well, I'm a this and I'm a that and you're a this and you're a that. And the Buddha was really interesting because the Buddha existed inside of already this happening. And my take on what happened is that the Buddha realized that there was a kind of toxic collectivism that was just a race to the bottom. Because the Buddha was like, why do I have all this money? I didn't earn it. Why are people suffering? They should just have distributed stuff. And so denounced their unearned privilege and went out on a quest to try to figure out what the fuck was going on, and sort of developed a new pathway through our collective karma, right? Try to go, this is crazy, this is nuts. People are just eating each other like cannibals. This is stupid. Caste systems and like slavery and stuff, and wealth inequality, right? And so the Buddha figured out how all of those issues were nascent inside of their soma because they have inherited some of the collective karma too. So they just went to the bottom of it. They just went, oh, this is my problem. They just saw everything as their problem instead of going, oh, that's your problem. They just went, well, what if it's all my problem? Right? What if it's all my problem? I'm just going to help. I'm going to try to help. And they did, and they tried to help, and then it becomes a thing called Buddhism. Now, the problem is that Buddha wasn't a Buddhist. Right? You hear what I'm saying? The Buddha wasn't a Buddhist. And so then all of the various traditions around that time sort of come together, inform each other, and become what they are today. Because Taoism is essentially a blend of like Buddhism and Tantra and Hinduism and all the other stuff, and like weird animist witchcraft that has no name in those regions, and it's now just collected into like the 17 schools of Taoism or whatever you want to call it, right? And then there's like the offshoot into Japan where now you have Zen, but Zen is really Buddhism, but also not, like it's just forever blah, blah, blah. But the problem we have as these falcons are hunting above my head is that you now have highly segregated cultures, such as America and the culture of whiteness and all of these other things. You have these highly segregated cultures who latch onto a form of wisdom and use it to enforce their already existing biases and fictions. And now we have bypass Buddhism, and bypass Dzogchen, and bypass Tantra, and bypass Christianity, and bypass Western magic, and bypass occultism, and bypass, right? So now you have a toxic form of wisdom traditions appropriated and co-opted and corrupted by people who just want to escape collective karma in a way that isn't like the Buddha did. Not saying that's my problem too. I'll work to fix it, and I'll work inside me and in the world to do something about it. Now you have people who go, well, there just is no self, so I don't have any trauma, and there's no problem. And in the context of real wisdom, they're absolutely correct. There is no trauma, and there is no self, and there is no problem. But you see the slope. Do you see the slippery slope? Because unless you're a collectivist, you don't know what that means. If you're still secretly an individualist, I think you know exactly what that means. It's a get out of jail free card, right? Now, there is no jail, because freedom is interdependence. You can't have it any other way. You can't have the freedom and liberation that is available to everyone immediately, like the wisdom traditions say, without also being deeply aware of how we are intimately and completely connected and inseparable all the time. And that our karma is our karma, and our trauma is our trauma. So, the nascent, undefined, non-dual animism of our ancient black grandmothers and the highly refined non-dual animism of certain wisdom traditions like Dzogchen or Taoism, which I do really respect and practice, must be alchemized in the central channel of the practitioner. And when you do this, you basically take those two books, the book of the bypasser and the book of the victim, the book of the hero and the book of the victim, and you return them to their wholeness state. The unfractured, unoutsourced totality that they actually are, the whole story. Which is to say, you no longer memorialize your personal history of trauma or your people's personal history of trauma. You don't bypass it either. So if you're a white person listening to this, this is what you have to do with your colonizer, weirdo ancestors who were running away from serfdom in Europe by just outsourcing it onto other people. And of course they weren't necessarily all doing that on purpose. A lot of them were like running away from like famines and all sorts of shit, right? Like they're not like Machiavellian schemer villains, like they're just, just people, But the karma, the consequences of their actions sort of tell us what the karma is about. It highlights it for us all. So this is the roadmap to a kind of mixed race, genderqueer, non-dual animism that is sort of constantly undifferentiating itself into a collectivism. And constantly sees how toxic individualism is preventing us from actually becoming whole inside our feeling state, our felt sense of wholeness, which is what we all want to feel. And that's what belonging feels like. So that when I look at the grass, I can feel the ancestors, but it's not like my ancestors, because there is no mine. But there is a felt sense of being together in a kind of collective game. And that collective game sometimes is very difficult. But it's collective game. I look around at all the other beings and I see them also playing the game. And I feel something different because it's not just fucking me and my solipsistic, navel-gazing individual problems. But the culture we're in keeps telling us that it is. Dare, you're poor because you're this and you're this. You're sick because you don't do the practices enough. Right? You're sick, you're poor, that's your problem. You don't do you're not. So this is where you also see the bypassing inside of wisdom traditions co-opted by individuals who really want to escape interdependence. Right? They're like, well, I did all the practices and I never get sick and I'm rich, so It's on you, buddy. We're going to have to become very clear on what collectivism really means if we're going to die in a way that is graceful and with dignity and with care and with the capacity to remediate some of this ghosthood. Because we are ghosts. As a collective, we're kind of ghosts. And I said this in a different post, and I'm going to write more about it, but this kind of like ghost Ubuntu. It's like the collective is becoming more ghostly. We can't escape that. So there's love, but it's also ghostly love. And the ghostly love appears as a kind of whining victimhood story about how fucked we are. And you see it in various pockets. You've got various marginalized people constantly rallying, constantly victimizing and memorializing their trauma. You've got the climate activists with their climate grief constantly memorializing their grief constantly. To me, that's only a small part of collectivism, and it needs to be dealt with in a very clear way. And not a lot of people are going to want to hear this, because actually that's part of the narcissistic addiction pattern, the addiction to dissociation. You think that you're not dissociating when you're constantly feeling bad because you're feeling bad. No, that's still dissociation. Because feeling bad is not reality. Your perceptions are not reality. But they are a way that you can get to reality if you work them. But constantly thinking that because you're feeling like shit, you're doing the work, that's not it. Sometimes you do need to feel like shit to do the work. But all the time, as a narrative about your identity, no, that's garbage. That's another addiction to dissociation. And if you're constantly feeling great, like you're constantly bypassing everything, so all you feel is like dopamine hits and narcissistic like supply all the time, you're also doing it wrong. That's also dissociation. So each person listening is going to have to deal with how they dissociate and then tell themselves that they're not, because they'd rather have this individualized fiction that feels like it's defending them from something that they need to be defended from. And the reality is that that's not the collectivism I'm talking about. That's not the non-dual animistic collectivism that I'm talking about. So, I have some writing on this that I'll compile, but I want you to be very careful with your grasping for information. Because if you think that understanding everything I said conceptually and intelligently is going to somehow save you, you're fooling yourself. I'm only saying these things because I feel like they need to be said, and they're sort of like breadcrumbs on a long path towards actual solidarity and mutual aid. Not talking about solidarity and mutual aid. I'm just talking about it. And I'm trying to give it away for free as a small attempt to be like, look, I hope this helps. But eventually, we have to do real shit. Not just concept shit. Not just, well, read these 10 blog posts and you'll be healed from your karma. Read these 10 tips. What Dare is saying, read them. And then, no. Maybe if you read what I'm saying or you hear what I'm saying, you feel something really coming alive in you. But that's the work. I'm just trying to spark a fire. But then you need to tend that fire and have a real relationship with your collective karma, inside and outside, like the Buddha, who is just a person, who said, these are all my problems, I'm going to deal with them. And he went inside and dealt with them. And when he went inside and dealt with them, he started to try to help other people. He didn't just go, well, I got it. It was mine. I got it. And I'm sure there have been people in the world who have gotten it and didn't become teachers because it wasn't their fate to become teachers. So they got it. They were healed. They went to collective nirvana or whatever, and they saw the ancestors, and they were like, thank you, and they just went home. And it's totally fine. Not everyone here is supposed to be a teacher, but everyone here is part of the collective. So everyone here can help somehow, even if you're sick and disabled. It doesn't mean you're gonna, I'm not saying go be Superman, Batman or something. I'm saying just live your fate in such a way that it's kind of obvious how you are interdependently woven together and being generous with each other. And I just do this talky thing because, it seems to be some part of my fate to do this talky thing and to do this word thing and to, stream this consciousness to people. But it's not mine, and honestly, it's not even really that fucking fun. I have fun doing the kind of performance bit because it's like dancing with spirits. But, to be honest, constantly explaining this shit is really stupid. I just see that there's a need because people are so fucking confused. And I go, well, maybe if you were less confused, you would just fucking get to it. And I don't even know what that means because I'm not going to go police your ass. I'm not going to be like, are you actually doing the work? I don't fucking know, and I don't fucking really care. I'm not like the fucking arbiter of what good karmic fate resolution looks like. All I'm doing is explaining how I'm dealing with my issues and what happens when I go dream and pray and get sick. And the spirits tell me shit. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's what you're telling me. Fucking... Right? But it does get clearer after a time. There is a gracefulness and there is a beauty. And I'm just trying to sort of explain that even though it's hard at the beginning, and it's hard in the middle, and it's hard at the end, it's not only hard. It's not only this kind of fucking crybaby trauma vortex shit. It's not only grief-stricken, heartbroken nonsense. On some level, that stuff is kind of funny. To constantly have your heart broken because people are people is kind of funny. Because we're all in this together, and there was never a way that we weren't. But this toxic individualism thing that everyone is peddling still about how special they can be because everyone needs to build a brand now. Don't build a brand, build a cooperative. Don't build a brand, build a cooperative. Don't become a superhero. Learn how to make groups of beings be able to come together to show what they can do when they come together. Right? So that's the talk for today. I'm done today. There's events. I told you about them. Go to the Substack. Do all the things if you want to. There's going to be more things because until I'm dead, I'm going to try to do the things so that we can come together and actually practice this stuff in person and not just this online dissociated fucking bottleneck nonsense where people are constantly misinterpreting everything I say because karma reasons. Hopefully this helped some of your ghosts. That's all I can really say. I don't really know. but hopefully it's helped some of your ghosts. And it doesn't mean that it did, and it doesn't mean that we're friends, and it doesn't mean that, like, I understand you and you understand me. It doesn't mean that, like, I feel the love or some bullshit like that. None of that is... I'm just so tired of all that part of the fake community game. But when people are really practicing and really doing the work, there is a joy that is hard to describe, because it's not codependent, but it's interdependent. And that's what really helps me keep going, because, man, whew, it's hard. It's hard. I got some shit thrown at me, man. But, whatever. So hopefully we'll meet again on the road somewhere down the line in person. And it won't be fucking nasty and weird. But regardless, wherever you're at, practice. Wherever you end up, practice. If you die or end up in a dream bardo realm, they're all the same. Wherever you end up, wherever you find yourself, that's the best place to practice. All right. Catch the recording. See you when I see you.